Refusing to surrender one room in my mountain retreat sparked a war with an HOA president hiding a dark secret, an illegal rental scheme exploiting neighbors' properties. But when her final cryptic text turned my victory into a chilling new threat, I realized the fight was far from over. Welcome to HOA Tragedies. Before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this. The knock on my door came at exactly 6:30 p.m. on a Friday, when I'd just settled in with a cup of hot chocolate after a long work week. I wasn't expecting visitors at my mountain retreat. That was the whole point of buying this place in Evergreen Pines. Peace, quiet, no surprise visitors. I opened the door to find Eleanor Thompson standing on my porch, her pearl necklace gleaming against her tailored blazer, despite the casual mountain setting. Behind her stood two men I recognized from neighborhood meetings, but whose names escaped me. "Good evening," I said, trying to hide my annoyance. "Is everything okay?" Eleanor didn't bother with pleasantries. "I've been elected as the new HOA president," she announced, her voice sharp as the winter air. "We're conducting property inspections to ensure compliance with our community standards." Before I could respond, she pushed past me into my living room, her eyes scanning every corner like she was taking inventory. "I don't recall agreeing to an inspection," I said, following her. "Usually, these things require notice." She waved a dismissive hand. "Emergency protocol. We've had reports of unauthorized renovations in the area." Her gaze landed on my large windows overlooking the valley. "Beautiful view. Is that your guest cottage I see through the trees?" I nodded cautiously. The cottage was my pride and joy, a small, cozy space I'd renovated myself for when my parents visited from Florida. "Perfect," Eleanor said, her lips curving into what I'm sure she thought was a smile, but looked more like a predator eyeing prey. "The HOA will be using that space for our quarterly meetings starting next month. The community center is undergoing extensive renovations." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, but that's my private property." "Actually," she pulled a thick binder from her bag. Flipping to a highlighted section, according to Bylaw 16.4, the association reserves the right to utilize suitable private spaces for community functions when public facilities are unavailable. One of the men, balding with glasses too small for his face, nodded importantly. "It's standard procedure." "I've never heard of this rule," I said, feeling my cheeks flush. "And I read all the paperwork before buying." Eleanor's smile tightened. "It was amended last year. We sent notices." I thought back to the stack of HOA mail I'd admittedly skimmed over the past months. Had I missed something this important? "I'll need to check that," I said firmly. "And even if such a rule exists, my cottage isn't suitable." "It's personal space with family belongings." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. "We'll need the keys by Monday. Our first meeting is Wednesday at 7:01 p.m. We'll expect the space to be cleared and prepared with seating for 12. The second man, younger with a constantly nodding head, added, "We can help move any personal items to storage." I felt my hands clench at my sides. "I'm not giving you my keys or access to my cottage. That's final." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as Eleanor stared at me. "I don't think you understand," she said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "This isn't a request. The bylaws are legally binding. Refusing constitutes a violation." "Then I guess I'm in violation," I replied, moving toward the door. "Now, unless you have an actual inspection warrant, I'd like you to leave." Eleanor snapped her binder shut. "This is disappointing. I expected better community spirit from you." She handed me a paper from her pocket. "Here's the formal request. You have 3 days to comply before penalties begin." As they filed out, my neighbor James appeared at the edge of my property, walking his golden retriever. He slowed, watching the trio march down my driveway to their waiting SUV. Once they were out of earshot, he approached. "I see you've met Queen Eleanor," he said quietly. "Is she always this demanding?" I asked, still holding the paper. James glanced around nervously. Worse, watch your back. She doesn't take no for an answer. He lowered his voice. The Millers refused her request to use their pool for an HOA event last summer. Within a month, they were drowning in violation notices until they finally sold and moved. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the mountain air. That's ridiculous. She can't force people out of their homes over petty rule enforcement. Tell that to the 3 families who've left since she took over, James replied. Look, I've got to go. But word of advice, document everything. Every conversation, every notice. He tugged his dog's leash and hurried away, leaving me standing in my doorway, wondering if my dream home had just become a nightmare. The next morning, I spread the HOA documents across my kitchen table, determined to find this mysterious bylaw 16.4. After 2 hours of reading legal jargon, I found it. But the wording was nothing like what Eleanor had claimed. The actual bylaw stated that homeowners could volunteer their spaces for community functions with proper compensation and formal agreements. Volunteer, not be forced. My phone rang. An unknown number. Hello, this is Councilwoman Deirdre Walsh, said a clipped voice. I understand you're having some issues with your homeowners association. I frowned. How did you know that? Eleanor Thompson contacted me this morning. She mentioned a homeowner who's refusing to cooperate with community needs during their renovation crisis. My jaw dropped. There's no crisis. She wants to take over my guest cottage for HOA meetings. That's not in the bylaws. A pause. Well, I'm not involved in HOA disputes, but I've known Eleanor for years. She's done wonders for property values in communities she manages. Something in her tone made me suspicious. Manages? I thought she was just our HOA president. Another pause. Eleanor has leadership roles in several mountain communities. Her property management company oversees 5 HOA boards. That information struck me as important, though I wasn't sure why yet. Councilwoman, does the town have records of these community center renovations? Eleanor mentioned them, but I haven't seen any construction activity there. I wouldn't know about that, she replied quickly. I should go. I just wanted to encourage neighborhood cooperation. After she hung up, I grabbed my jacket and drove to the community center. The parking lot was empty, the building quiet. No construction equipment, no workers, no renovation signs. I peered through the windows. Everything looked normal inside. I took photos with my phone, documenting the untouched building, then drove home with growing suspicion. Why would Eleanor lie about renovations? When I pulled into my driveway, a bright orange paper was taped to my front door. Violation notice. Beneath it was a list of supposed infractions: improper fence height, unauthorized bird feeder, non-compliant mailbox color, and failure to comply with community space requirements. The fine, $250 per day, until all violations were remedied. My hands shook as I tore down the notice. Across the street, Eleanor's SUV was parked in front of James's house. Through his front window, I could see them arguing. I pulled out my phone and called my cousin Sophia, who happened to be an attorney specializing in property law. They can't do this, she said after I explained. HOAs have power, but not this kind of power. Don't give them a dime, and definitely don't give them your keys. What should I do? I asked, watching as Eleanor stormed out of James's house. Document everything. I'm emailing you a cease and desist letter template. Send it certified mail, and let's meet tomorrow at Westlake Cafe to discuss strategy. As I hung up, Eleanor spotted me in my driveway. Instead of coming over, she smiled coldly and made a show of taking photos of my property with her phone. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak made me wonder if someone was trying to access my cottage. Around midnight, headlights swept across my bedroom ceiling. I peeked through the blinds to see Eleanor and the 2 men from before taking more photos of my property in the darkness. I quietly snapped pictures of them trespassing at midnight, then sent the images to Sophia with the message, "It's worse than I thought." Her reply came immediately. Don't engage. Meet me tomorrow. I'm bringing reinforcements. I watched from my window as they methodically documented my property, wondering what reinforcements Sophia had in mind, and whether my peaceful mountain dream was about to turn into an all-out war. I arrived at Westlake Cafe 15 minutes early, clutching a folder of HOA documents and violation notices. The cozy coffee shop sat at the edge of town, its large windows offering views of the lake where summer tourists would rent paddle boats in warmer months. Now, in early spring, the water lay still and empty, just like the table where Sophia had promised to meet me. I checked my phone. No messages. This wasn't like my cousin, who valued punctuality almost as much as she valued the law itself. I ordered a coffee and waited, watching the door swing open with each new customer, none of them Sophia. After 30 minutes, I texted her, "I'm at Westlake. Everything okay?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared before her message loaded. Meeting postponed. Eleanor called my office claiming you agreed to settle. Said you authorized her as your representative. Obviously a lie, but she's playing hardball. Don't go home yet. New location, James's workshop on Pine Trail. Go now. My coffee sat forgotten as I rushed to my car. A silver SUV appeared in my rear-view mirror, following too closely. It looked like Eleanor's vehicle. I made a sudden turn onto a side road, then another, until the SUV was no longer behind me. By the time I reached Pine Trail, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. James's workshop turned out to be a converted barn at the edge of his property, partially hidden by tall pines. I parked behind it, as instructed in Sophia's second text. Inside, I found not just Sophia and James, but 3 other neighbors I recognized from community mailbox encounters. An older woman named Margaret, who walked her corgi every morning at dawn. A middle-aged man called Derek, who worked from home and collected rare books. And Sarah, a quiet accountant who lived 2 streets over. "Lock the door," James said instead of a greeting. "What's going on?" I asked, taking in their serious expressions. "Why all the secrecy?" Sophia's professional demeanor had an edge I'd never seen before. "Eleanor Thompson tried to impersonate you to my legal assistant. When that failed, she threatened to report me to the state bar for interfering in HOA matters." "Can she do that?" I asked. "No, but the attempt shows how far she'll go," Sophia replied. "You're not dealing with an overzealous HOA president." "This is something else." Margaret spoke up, her voice stronger than her frail appearance suggested. 3 months ago, Eleanor demanded access to my garden shed, claiming it violated setback requirements and needed inspection. A week later, I found strangers using it to store furniture. When I complained, I received violation notices for my garden gnomes, bird bath, and wind chimes. "The same thing happened to my workshop," James added. "I was told it needed a safety inspection. Now, half of it is filled with boxes I'm not allowed to touch, supposedly community property and storage during renovations." Derek nodded. "My pool house, too. They claimed it was built without proper permits, even though it predates the HOA by 10 years. Sarah, the accountant, opened her laptop. I started noticing financial discrepancies in the HOA newsletters. They report spending $175,000 on community center renovations over the past year, but the building hasn't been touched. I just confirmed that yesterday." "I said there's no construction happening," I interjected. "Exactly," Sarah turned her laptop toward me. "But look at these bank statements." On the screen was an account statement for Evergreen Pines Community Holdings, showing transfers to various contractors and service providers. "How did you get these?" I asked. "I'm the backup treasurer," Sarah explained. "I'm supposed to have access to financial records, but Eleanor removed me from most accounts. These are the only statements I can still see, and they don't match our community's actual expenses." Sophia took over. "We think Eleanor and her team are running a scheme across multiple HOAs. They take control of private spaces, claim they're needed for community purposes, then use them for something else entirely. Like what? I asked. James pulled out his phone and showed me a listing on a vacation rental site. The photos showed a familiar space, his workshop, but staged as a rustic mountain retreat. "They're renting out our spaces to tourists," Margaret said bitterly. "My garden shed is listed as a charming garden cottage for $129 per night." My blood ran cold. And my guest cottage would be next. "It's prime real estate," Derek noted. "Standalone unit with that view? They could get $300 a night easily. The HOA collects the money, labels it as community improvement funds, but the improvements never happen," Sarah explained. "Meanwhile, anyone who objects gets buried in violation, notices and fines until they either comply or move." Sophia placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your situation gives us an opportunity. By attempting to contact me fraudulently, Eleanor has exposed herself to legal consequences. If you're willing, we can use your case to unravel this whole operation." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your violation fines now total $750. Additionally, you've been summoned to an emergency HOA hearing tomorrow regarding your continued non-compliance. Failure to attend will result in an automatic judgment against you." I showed the group. "They're moving fast because you're fighting back," James said. "Most people just give in." Another text arrived, this one with an attachment. I opened it to find legal papers. Eleanor was suing me for breach of HOA covenants, seeking not just access to my guest cottage, but $15,000 in damages for willful obstruction of community functions. The room fell silent as everyone read over my shoulder. "This is perfect," Sophia finally said, her attorney instincts kicking in. "Now we can request financial discovery and depose Eleanor under oath." "Perfect," I echoed. "I'm being sued for $15,000. "A lawsuit works both ways," Sophia explained. "They've just given us legal authority to demand their records, communications, and finances. They've opened the door to their own scheme." Sarah's laptop pinged with an email alert. Her face paled as she read it. "Eleanor just removed me from the last financial account I had access to. The message says I'm under investigation for unauthorized access to confidential records." James moved to the window, peering through the blinds. "We need to be careful. Eleanor has people watching. That's why we met here instead of in public." As if on cue, a car drove slowly past the workshop, the driver clearly looking toward the building. "Is that her?" I asked, joining James at the window. "One of her board members," he confirmed. "The balding man with the glasses." I suddenly felt exposed. "How did they know we're here?" Derek held up his phone. "They've installed a new security system throughout the neighborhood. Cameras at every entrance and major intersection, supposedly for community safety." "Surveillance cameras?" I asked incredulously. "That wasn't put to a vote." "Nothing is anymore," Margaret said bitterly. "Board meetings are closed, minutes aren't published, and decisions are made without homeowner input." My phone buzzed again. Another text. "Your attorney's involvement constitutes escalation of a simple community matter. Be advised that legal fees will be added to your account." Sophia read it and laughed. "They're scared. They didn't expect you to get legal help so quickly." "What's our next move?" I asked, feeling both terrified and determined. "We counterpunch," Sophia said firmly. "I'll file a response to their lawsuit with a countersuit for harassment, fraud, and financial malfeasance. Sarah, can you compile all the financial discrepancies you found? James, we need those rental listings documented before they take them down." "And me?" I asked. "You," Sophia said, "need to attend that HOA hearing tomorrow with me as your representative. Let's see how Eleanor handles facing an attorney when she thought she could bully you alone." As we prepared to leave separately to avoid attention, James stopped me at the door. "Be careful going home," Check your cottage immediately. Based on their pattern, they might try to access it while you're gone. The thought sent a chill through me. They wouldn't break in, would they? Margaret touched my arm. Dear, they changed the locks on my shed while I was at my daughter's wedding. Nothing would surprise me anymore. I drove home the long way, constantly checking for followers. As I rounded the final curve to my driveway, I slammed on the brakes. There, in broad daylight, stood Eleanor and 3 strangers on my porch, one of them fiddling with the lock to my guest cottage. With shaking hands, I called 911, then started recording video on my phone. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This was breaking and entering. I gripped my phone tightly as I rushed toward Westlake Cafe, my heart racing. Eleanor had somehow gotten to Sophia before I could. What lies had she told my cousin? The text message from Sophia had been brief. Come now, not alone. The cafe windows steamed with the breath of morning customers. Through the foggy glass, I spotted Sophia's red blazer. But she wasn't alone. 4 other people huddled around her table, speaking in hushed tones that stopped the moment I pushed open the door. You're being watched, James said, pulling out a chair for me. I hadn't spoken more than 10 words to my neighbor in the 3 years I'd owned my mountain house. Now he looked at me like we were old war buddies. Eleanor followed you here, whispered a woman I didn't recognize. She's sitting in her white SUV across the street, taking pictures. Sophia slid a folder toward me. My name is all over the county records. After I started making inquiries, she called my office, pretending to be you, saying you wanted to drop everything. I would never, I began. I know, Sophia cut me off. That's why we're here. Meet your fellow victims. James introduced everyone quickly. Sarah, a small woman with sharp eyes and a calculator watch, lived just beyond the ridge. I'm an accountant. Been tracking the HOA money for months. It doesn't add up. The older gentleman with the salt and pepper beard was Dr. Miller. They took my pool house last year. Said it was for community swim lessons for kids. I've yet to see a single swimming child. A younger couple, the Robertsons, held hands tightly on the table. Our workshop became community storage 6 months ago. Then we saw tourists coming and going from it all summer. I don't understand, I said, feeling the weight of all their eyes. How can they just take our property? Sarah opened her laptop. They can't. But look at this. The screen showed bank statements, dozens of them with highlighted transfers. They've moved over $30,000 through the HOA accounts last quarter alone. Money comes in from vacation rental sites, gets broken into smaller amounts, then disappears. They're using our properties as vacation rentals. My voice rose higher than I intended. They're renting out our spaces? A few cafe patrons glanced our way. Dr. Miller nodded grimly. My pool house is listed on 3 different websites. Charming mountain studio with private entrance. But the HOA bylaws, I started. Have loopholes, Sophia finished. There's language about community benefit that Eleanor is twisting, but it's fraud, pure and simple. The cafe door jingled. We all froze as a tall man in a delivery uniform entered, locked eyes with James, and slipped him a small envelope before leaving. My buddy at the courthouse, James explained, ripping it open. Eleanor just filed a lawsuit against you. She's asking for immediate access to your guest cottage and $15,000 in damages. My stomach dropped. Damages for what? For emotional distress to the community and obstruction of HOA business, James read. I felt sick. I can't afford this. I put everything into that house. Sophia's hand covered mine. This is actually good news. How is being sued good news? The Robertsons asked in unison. Because now we can request financial discovery. Sophia's smile turned wolfish. They have to open their books. All of them. A sharp tap on the glass made us all jump. Eleanor stood outside, phone pointed at us like a weapon. Her lips curled into a smug smile when she recognized Sophia. She didn't expect you to have a lawyer in the family, James muttered. She definitely didn't expect you to have us, Dr. Miller added. I call us the Mountain Defense League, said Mrs. Robertson with a small smile. We've been waiting for someone like you, someone who would fight back. My phone buzzed with a text message showing the lawsuit notification. Attached was a personal note from Eleanor. You could have just given me the room. Now I'll take everything. I looked up at my new allies, fear giving way to something stronger. So what's our plan? Sophia opened a fresh legal pad. First we countersue, then we follow the money. She glanced out the window where Eleanor was still watching. And then we make her regret ever knocking on your door. Dr. Miller leaned forward. There's something else you should know. 3 homeowners who fought Eleanor have sold their houses suddenly, well below market value. To whom? I asked, already guessing the answer. Shell companies, Sarah replied, all linked to Eleanor's brother-in-law, a real estate developer who specializes in luxury vacation properties. The pieces snapped together in my mind. She's not just stealing our rooms. She's trying to force us out entirely and turn our mountain community into a tourist trap, James added. Outside, Eleanor finally turned away from the window, speaking rapidly into her phone. Her face had lost its confident smile, replaced by something harder, more determined. She's calling reinforcements, Sophia observed. From this moment on, document everything. Record every conversation. Take pictures of anything unusual. Like that, I pointed to the parking lot where 2 men in HOA maintenance uniforms were circling my car, taking photos of my license plate. Exactly like that. Sophia's voice hardened. The game has changed. She wanted your guest cottage. Now she'll have to deal with all of us. As if on cue, all our phones buzzed simultaneously. A message from an unknown number. Emergency HOA meeting tonight. Attendance mandatory. Violations to be addressed. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard. According to bylaws, they need 3 days' notice for meetings unless there's a safety emergency. What are they planning? Mrs. Robertson whispered. I think I know, I said slowly, remembering Eleanor's threats. They're going to try to take my house tonight, but they don't know what we know or who's on our side now. The cafe owner approached our table with a concerned look. Everything okay here? That woman outside was making my customers uncomfortable. James smiled reassuringly. Everything's fine. In fact, he glanced at our determined faces, I think things are finally looking up. The courthouse steps felt endless as I climbed them beside Sophia the next morning. My legs were heavy with exhaustion after a night of no sleep. The emergency HOA meeting had been worse than I imagined. You look terrible, Sophia whispered, straightening my collar. But that might work in our favor. The judge needs to see what they're putting you through. Last night, Eleanor had stood before 50 neighbors and painted me as a dangerous rebel threatening our community's safety. Fire code violations in the guest cottage make it unsafe for occupancy, she had announced, producing a report I'd never seen before. As president, I move that we assume emergency control until repairs are made. The vote passed before I could even speak. Only James, the Millers, and the Robertsons had stood with me. My client is filing for an immediate injunction, Sophia announced now to the clerk, and we're countersuing for harassment, fraud, and conspiracy. The clerk's eyebrows rose as she stamped our paperwork. 3rd case against Evergreen Pines HOA this month. You folks sure know how to keep us busy. 3rd case? I asked once we were in the hallway. I checked the records last night, Sophia said. 2 other homeowners filed complaints, then suddenly withdrew them and moved away. Her voice dropped. Both sold to Pinnacle Retreats LLC, Eleanor's brother-in-law. I whispered, exactly. Judge Harmon was a tiny woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Another HOA dispute, she sighed, reviewing our filing, though this one has some interesting additions. Fraud allegations, Miss Reed? Sophia stood. Yes, Your Honor. We have evidence suggesting the HOA has been illegally converting private property for commercial use, specifically short-term vacation rentals. Eleanor's attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit, jumped up. Preposterous. This is a simple matter of bylaw enforcement against a non-compliant member. Then you won't mind producing the HOA financial records, Judge Harmon replied evenly. All of them, including rental income, website accounts, and personal transactions of board members. The color drained from Eleanor's face. We also request a temporary restraining order preventing any HOA member from entering my client's property, Sophia added. The judge nodded. Granted. Financial records to be produced within 48 hours. No entry to plaintiff's property pending resolution. Next case. It happened so fast I could barely believe it. As we exited the courtroom, Eleanor brushed past me. You have no idea what you've started, she hissed. I was about to respond when my phone rang. It was James, his voice tight with panic. Get home now. They're at your house. The drive back to Evergreen Pines took 20 minutes, each one feeling like an hour. When I crested the final ridge, I saw them. 3 maintenance trucks parked in my driveway, men in uniforms swarming around my house like ants. They can't do this, Sophia said, already dialing the sheriff. The judge just ordered them to stay away. I parked across the street and ran toward my property. What do you think you're doing? I shouted. A man in a Pine Valley maintenance cap looked up calmly. Emergency waterline repair, ma'am. Got reports of a major leak threatening the neighborhood water supply. There's no leak, I said through gritted teeth. And you need my permission to be here. Not for emergency utility work, he replied, flashing a work order. HOA Bylaws, Section 7, Paragraph 3. Behind him, I saw someone exiting my guest cottage with a toolbox. The door left wide open. This is trespassing, Sophia announced, holding up her phone. I'm recording everything, and I just got off the phone with Sheriff Garcia. He's on his way with the court order. The workers exchanged glances but didn't move. You have 2 minutes to vacate my property, I said with more confidence than I felt. A sleek black car pulled up beside my driveway. Eleanor stepped out, somehow looking fresh and polished despite the early hour. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, she called, walking toward us with her hands spread wide. Our maintenance team got their assignments mixed up. They were supposed to be at the community center. The center that's supposedly under renovation? I asked. The reason you needed my guest cottage in the first place? Eleanor's smile didn't waver. Simple mistake. Men, please pack up and head to the correct location. The workers moved quickly, but not before I noticed one of them slipping something into his pocket from my guest cottage. What did he take? I demanded, starting toward him. Eleanor stepped in my path. Be careful with accusations. They can be damaging, like your countersuit. Your Honor, Sophia called out suddenly, looking past us. I turned to see Judge Harmon herself stepping from a county car, followed by a sheriff's deputy. I was on my way to a conference when I got a most unusual call, the judge said. Something about a restraining order being violated less than an hour after I issued it. Eleanor's confidence cracked. Your Honor, this is a simple misunderstanding. Save it for court, Judge Harmon cut her off. Deputy, please document the scene. Ms. Reed, your motion for emergency sanctions is looking more reasonable by the minute. As the sheriff documented the workers' presence, I slipped past them to check my guest cottage. The door had been forced open, and inside the place had been thoroughly searched. Drawers hung open, couch cushions askew. They were looking for something, I told Sophia when she joined me. Or planting something, she replied grimly. Check everything. It took hours with the sheriff's help, but we finally found it. A tiny camera hidden in a smoke detector and a listening device taped under the kitchen table. Illegal surveillance, the deputy noted, bagging the devices as evidence. By afternoon, we'd found 6 more cameras throughout my main house and guest cottage. She's been watching me, I said, feeling violated in a way I couldn't describe. But why? The answer came that evening. Sarah arrived breathless at my door, laptop in hand. "I followed the money," she announced, spreading bank statements across my kitchen table. "Eleanor's been running this scheme for 3 years across 7 different HOAs. Evergreen Pines is just her newest target." James and the Millers arrived minutes later, followed by the Robertsons. Together, we pieced together the full picture. Eleanor would get elected to HOA boards, identify valuable properties with separate spaces, manufacture violations against the owners, then either force them to surrender the spaces or pressure them to sell entirely. "The profit margin is incredible," Sarah explained. "A guest cottage rented through vacation sites can bring in $3,000 a month. Multiply that by dozens of properties." "And no one complained?" Dr. Miller asked. "They did," James said. "Then they were driven out or paid off." A sharp knock at the door made us all jump. Sophia peered through the peephole, then smiled. "Our secret weapon has arrived," she announced, opening the door to reveal a familiar face. The reporter from the Pine Valley Gazette, who'd covered community events for years. "I hear you have quite a story for me," she said, setting down her notebook. "Something about an HOA president running an illegal rental, empire and surveilling homeowners. Eleanor's perfectly crafted image would not survive this night." The reporter took notes and photos of the surveillance equipment. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. "She won't stop," I said to Sophia when we had a moment alone. "She has too much to lose." "That's exactly why we'll win," my cousin replied. "Because desperate people make mistakes." My phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. "Don't answer it," James warned. "It's probably her trying to intimidate you again." But something told me to take the call. I put it on speaker. "You should check your email." Eleanor's voice was eerily calm. "I think you'll find my settlement offer quite generous." "There will be no settlement," Sophia replied firmly. "Oh, hello, counselor. Still playing lawyer with your little cousin?" "How sweet," Eleanor's voice dripped with condescension. "But I wasn't talking to you. This is between me and the stubborn homeowner who started all this trouble." "You started this when you tried to take my property," I responded. A soft laugh came through the speaker. "Did you check your deed carefully? There's a reason I chose your cottage first." The call ended abruptly, leaving us all staring at each other. "What did she mean?" Mrs. Robertson asked. Sophia was already pulling up the county property records on her laptop. She scrolled through my deed, eyes narrowing as she reached the attachments. "There's a property line dispute from before you bought the house," she said slowly. "It was supposedly resolved, but the resolution was never properly filed. Technically, there's a question about whether the guest cottage sits partially on common HOA land." The realization hit like ice water. She knew this all along. She was counting on it. "This changes nothing," Sophia insisted. "It's a technicality at best. And it doesn't excuse fraud, surveillance, or harassment." But as our group dispersed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor had planned for this moment, that somehow, despite everything we'd uncovered, she still held a card we hadn't seen. I stood on my deck, looking at the guest cottage that had started this war. Lights from Eleanor's house blazed across the valley, as if she was keeping watch. "What are you really after?" I whispered into the night air. As if in answer, my phone lit up with an email. The subject line read, "What I really want." I hesitated before opening it, imagining threats or demands. Instead, I found a single sentence and an attachment. "It was never about the cottage," Eleanor had written. The attachment was a geological survey of evergreen pines with my property circled in red. "All rise." The bailiff's voice echoed through the packed courtroom as Judge Harmon entered. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. Eleanor sat across the aisle, her designer suit and perfect hair making her look like she belonged on a magazine cover, not facing fraud charges. "Did you see her face when she walked in?" James whispered beside me. "She still thinks she's going to win." I nodded silently, watching as Sophia arranged her documents at our table. The weight of the past 3 months, the harassment, the fines, the sleepless nights, all led to this moment. "First witness," Judge Harmon announced, adjusting her glasses. A small man with round spectacles approached the stand. I recognized him immediately as Mike Turner, the forensic accountant Sophia had hired. "Mr. Turner, please explain what you found in the HOA financial records," Sophia began. Mike cleared his throat. "The board moved $172,500 through 7 different accounts in just 8 months. He pointed to the screen where bank statements appeared. Money that was supposed to go toward community improvements instead went to private accounts controlled by Mrs. Thompson. Eleanor's attorney jumped up. "Objection. These records weren't properly obtained." Judge Harmon frowned. "These records were obtained through legitimate discovery after your client filed the initial lawsuit. Overruled. Continue." I watched Eleanor's confident smile slowly disappear as one damning piece of evidence followed another. Fake renovation contracts, made-up meeting minutes, photos of my guest cottage listed on vacation rental websites with Eleanor's personal phone number. The scheme was simple but effective, Mike explained. They would force homeowners to give up spaces using HOA rules, then rent those spaces to tourists, keeping all profits. During a short break, I stepped into the hallway for water. The stress had left my mouth dry as sand. "Quite a show in there," came Eleanor's voice from behind me. I turned to find her standing too close, her perfume overwhelming. "I can make this all go away," she whispered. "Drop your countersuit, and you'll never hear from me again." "I'm not interested," I started. "Think about it," she cut me off. "You're just one person. I have connections all over Evergreen Pines. This doesn't end well for you, even if you win today." Sophia appeared beside me, her expression fierce. "My client isn't interested in private negotiations," she said loudly enough for the people nearby to hear. "But the district attorney might be interested in what you just said." Eleanor's face drained of color as she spotted a man in a dark suit entering the courthouse. "Is that District Attorney Phillips?" Sophia confirmed. "We had lunch yesterday. Fascinating conversation about HOA fraud patterns across the county." Eleanor's lawyer frantically waved her back to their table, but she stood frozen, watching as her carefully built empire began crumbling around her. James took the stand next, pulling out a thick binder. "I've documented every HOA interaction for 3 years, he testified. "They've been running this same scheme in 3 different communities." The judge leaned forward. "And you believe the defendant knew this was illegal?" James nodded firmly. "At the last meeting, when I questioned the budget, Mrs. Thompson told me to mind my own business unless I wanted my gardening shed reassigned for community purposes. 2. By the time court adjourned for the day, even Eleanor's attorney looked defeated. As people filed out, I overheard snippets of conversation from other homeowners. Just like what happened to us last year. Took our pool house, too." Outside the courthouse, camera crews waited. The local news had gotten wind of the case. Eleanor pushed past them, hiding her face, while Sophia spoke briefly to reporters. "This isn't just about one guest cottage," she explained. "This is about holding powerful people accountable when they abuse their positions." As we walked to the parking lot, my phone buzzed with messages from neighbors I'd never even spoken to, all sharing similar stories about Eleanor and the HOA board. "What happens now?" I asked Sophia as she opened her car door. She smiled. "Now we wait for the judge's ruling, but based on what we saw today," she paused as a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up nearby. The window rolled down just enough to reveal Eleanor, in heated conversation with someone inside. "I'd say someone's very worried about what comes next. 6 months can change everything." The fresh paint on the community center gleamed in the afternoon light as I unlocked the doors for our monthly meeting. People smiled and greeted each other, a stark contrast to the tense, suspicious gatherings of the past. "Need help setting up?" James asked, carrying a tray of cookies his wife had baked. I nodded gratefully. "Put those on the back table. Sarah should be here any minute with the financial reports." The courtroom victory had been swift and decisive. Once the evidence was presented, Judge Harmon's ruling came down hard. Eleanor and 3 board members were found guilty of fraud and embezzlement. The court appointed a receiver to recover the stolen funds, over $200,000 across all affected communities. But the real victory came after the legal battle ended. Evergreen Pines residents voted to completely rebuild our HOA from the ground up. I had somehow been elected president, despite my protests. "Look at this turnout," Sarah remarked as she entered, carrying neat stacks of papers. Our new treasurer took her job seriously. Biggest meeting yet. Nearly 40 homeowners filled the chairs we'd arranged. Some I recognized from the courthouse. Others I'd only met during our door-to-door campaign to reform the HOA. All seemed eager to participate in a way they never had before. "Let's get started," I announced once everyone settled in. First item, the recovered funds. Sarah distributed financial statements showing every penny accounted for. "Transparency is our foundation," she explained. "Unlike before, any homeowner can request these records anytime." As the meeting progressed, we voted on genuine community improvements, repairing the walking trails, installing new playground equipment, creating a community garden. Ideas flowed freely, respectfully, nothing like the dictatorial pronouncements of Eleanor's reign. Next item, I continued, the guest cottage issue. My own cottage, which had started this whole ordeal, had become symbolic. After much thought, I had decided to officially designate it as community space, by my choice, not coercion. We'll use it for small gatherings, classes, and visiting speakers, I explained. A true community asset, properly managed and scheduled. The vote passed unanimously, followed by applause. As the formal meeting ended and people mingled over coffee, Sophia pulled me aside. Her expression was serious despite our victory celebration. "There's something you should know," she said quietly. The district attorney's investigation went deeper than just Evergreen Pines. They uncovered similar schemes in 12 other mountain communities across 3 counties. I nearly spilled my coffee. 12? She nodded. Your stand didn't just save our neighborhood. It's helping hundreds of homeowners. The DA is pressing charges against an entire network of corrupt HOA officials. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I walked through the quiet community center, turning off lights. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I opened it, expecting another thank you from a neighbor. Instead, I read, "This isn't over." My hands trembled slightly as I showed the message to James, who had stayed to help clean up. "Eleanor?" he asked, frowning. "Has to be, but she's serving time." "Maybe not for long," James said grimly. "I heard her lawyer filed an appeal last week." I blocked the number, but a chill remained. Outside the windows, shadows seemed to move among the trees. Was it just the wind? As we locked up, James pointed to a car parked across the street, its headlights off. "Been there a while." "Probably nothing," I said, not believing it myself. That night I double-checked every lock in my house. As I finally settled into bed, an email notification appeared on my phone. The sender, E. Thompson. Subject line, "You took everything from me." Now it's my turn. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I did what had served me well so far. I prepared. If Eleanor wanted another battle, she'd find me ready. After all, I hadn't fought just for my guest cottage, but for something far more important. Justice in a community worth protecting, no matter what came next. Subscribe to HOA Tragedies for more stories of everyday people standing up to bullies. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is just living well and locking your doors tight. Another day, another ridiculous situation. HOA Tragedies delivers again. Don't forget to like and follow us for more juicy chaos.